We go up to space, and the crew who are in the the Dragon X capsule. This is the SpaceX crew that are due to be landing in about an hour's time. They're due to be coming back to Earth. These are NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, also the astronaut from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, Takuya Onishi, and a cosmonaut from Roscosmos, Kirill Peskov, who are returning to Earth after a 5-month mission to the International Space Station. They will be splashing down, is the technical term to describe it, somewhere on the US West Coast, and we're expecting that splashdown off the US West Coast in the next hour, just under an hour or so. They've spent about 5 months in space at the International Space Station, and they are now aboard the SpaceX Dragon capsule heading back to Earth. So we're keeping an eye on that, because it's always fascinating to see these moments. But when the actual splashdown happens in just under an hour's time, we will bring that to you. Now, after more than 4 decades of fighting, the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan could soon be brought to a conclusion. And that's after the Armenian Prime Minister and Azerbaijan's president signed a peace framework at the White House on Friday, following a prolonged conflict between the two countries over a disputed border region. President Trump hosted bilateral talks with the two leaders on Friday to cement the deal. The joint declaration also includes the creation of a transit corridor in the South Caucasus that will be named after President Trump. Well, our South Caucasus and Central Asia correspondent Reyhan Dimitri has more on this.
A huge significance for the South Caucasus region, this declaration, a commitment to sign peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan that have been in conflict since the 1980s. And yes, based on the document that we have seen that was signed by Prime Minister Pashinyan, President Aliyev of Azerbaijan, and witnessed by President Trump, it's the creation of this strategic route. It's a big game changer in this region, because this route will connect Azerbaijan with its exclave and will give Azerbaijan direct access to Turkey. That's what Azerbaijan has been pursuing for many years, since the end of the fighting, and it's been a sticking point, because there were threats that Azerbaijan might have taken this route by force, and it runs in southern Armenia along the border with Iran. So now this route is said to be named Trump's route for peace and prosperity, and it will be managed by an American company. So essentially, it's being leased to the Americans for 99 years. And we've seen last night a very good mood, all kind of smiles and flattery between the leaders of the two South Caucasus nations and President Trump. I think the people here are just waking up to this news. There is a lot to absorb, because we're talking about the decades-long conflict over the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. And yesterday at the press conference, one question was asked following the signing of this declaration, and the question was what's going to happen to 100,000 ethnic Armenians that were forced to abandon their homes in Nagorno-Karabakh in September 2023. And that question remained unanswered.
Our thanks to Reyhan Dimitri. Now, more details have been released about how the 80th anniversary of victory over Japan Day will be commemorated. Military bagpipers will play at dawn at Edinburgh Castle, the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, and also the Cenotaph in London. And later in the day, there'll be flypasts by the Red Arrows and the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, as military personnel pay tribute to veterans. Our reporter Jessica Lane has more.
On the 15th of August 1945, crowds of people gathered around the world to celebrate victory over Japan and the end, at last, of the war. On Thursday evening, a light show at the Memorial Gates at London's Green Park will tell the stories of some of those who served. At dawn on Friday, military bagpipers will perform a lament at the Cenotaph in London, Edinburgh Castle and the National Memorial Arboretum. There, later in the day, 400 military personnel will pay tribute to veterans, along with Gurkhas forming a guard of honour. The public are being asked to mark a 2-minute silence at midday.
This is a real opportunity for us to pay tribute to those veterans, but to listen to them, listen to their testimonies, what they went through to defend the freedoms that we enjoy today, and so that we can learn and build on their sacrifices for that hopeful future and that peace that they wanted, and we'll hear from them that they're hoping for again.
More than 1 million sing and dance in the streets in the biggest celebration the Windy City has ever seen.
Victory in Japan came at a heavy cost, and many thousands of personnel continued to fight in the Far East for months after the war in Europe ended in the May of that year. The ceremonies next week give an opportunity to commemorate the sacrifices made by people around the world who fought and died to bring an end to the conflict. Jessica Lane, BBC News.
The explorer Dwayne Fields, the first black Briton to walk to the North Pole, is hoping to inspire all young people to get out in nature, especially those living in urban areas. He's released an audiobook about his own journey, from experiencing street violence and homelessness to taking over from Bear Grylls as the UK's chief scout. Our reporter Anna O'Neill has been to meet him.
Spotted exploring the wilds of Primrose Hill, adventurer and now chief scout Dwayne Fields.
10 people have held the role before me, the longest being Baden Powell, the founder of the Scouts movement, followed by Bear Grylls, who preceded me. You know, many years ago when I first came to the UK, I struggled in every aspect of school. I couldn't make friends, I struggled to read. The only friend I had in school, real friend, the kid the teacher put me next to on day one, his mum was late dropping me home one day, and she said, "Look, Dwayne, I'll take you home once I've taken, you know, so-and-so to Scouts." And of course we pull up into the car park, he jumps out and runs inside, I jump out and chase him, and I freeze at the door because, you know, there's a tall man stood there, and he says, "Right, are you a new starter? Do you want to, you coming in? Have some fun, learn lots, make some friends." And for me that was the key thing, it was the make some friends part.
Years later he was asked to be an ambassador for the Scouts.
A few years passed, I'd walked to the North Pole, I'd worked with young people for a long time, and they reached out to me and said, "Dwayne, would you consider being one of our ambassadors?"
I just love the way you said that so casually.
Yeah.
You know, I'd walk to the North Pole, like anyone might do.
See, I can say that now. At the time, honestly, it was a completely different story.
Now he's written and voiced that story for a new audiobook called Exploring My Limits.
The book is a really good account of my journey so far. It talks about my experience of homelessness. It talks about my experience of street violence. It talks about my experiences deciding to take on a challenge like the Arctic, take on a challenge like walking across a desert. I talk about the challenges that I have in terms of my mental health and my emotional health. And again, just the struggle of day to day trying to fit in somewhere. And I think this is something that I've struggled with my entire life. When I was younger, I struggled to fit in school. When I, you know, mid-teens and early 20s, I struggled to maintain my friendships because I just never quite felt like I fitted in. And I think the book covers a lot of that as well, which many young people feel.
Do you feel like you fit in now, or do you think it's okay to?
It's okay
to not fit in completely.
It's okay
to be different.
Not to fit in completely. I think it took me a long time to understand that and to accept it as well. I'm a little bit odd, I'm a little bit quirky, but that's okay. So many of us are.
Anna O'Neill, BBC News.
What an inspiring story. Now, the former NASA astronaut Jim Lovell, commander of Apollo 13, who in 1970 helped turn a failed moon mission into a triumph of survival, has died. He was 97. The spacecraft suffered an oxygen tank explosion, but he managed to return his crew safely back to Earth. Here's Palav Ghosh.
Jim Lovell was one of America's earliest astronauts, training for his first spaceflight in 1965 in NASA's Gemini program. to develop the Apollo rockets that would take astronauts to the lunar surface. In 1968, he and his crew became the first people to reach the moon.
All systems are go, Apollo 8.
They did not land, but their views of Earth from space showed it as a beautiful, fragile planet. On Christmas Eve, he and his fellow astronauts read from the book of Genesis.
And the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And we have liftoff at 2:13.
2 years later, he was on his way back to the moon. This time, the mission was due to land. But then...
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B bus undervolt.
We heard a sharp bang, the spacecraft vibrated back and forth, and then everything was quiet.
One of the spacecraft's oxygen tanks exploded. The crew were trapped in a spacecraft low on power and water. Lovell was in command.
We are venting something out into space.
We were some 200,000 miles from Earth, some 90 hours to get home, and we were going in the wrong direction.
People across the world followed their fate. The crew had to move to the lunar lander to stay alive. They kept their cool, while engineers at Mission Control plotted a new course for the spacecraft that would bring it home.
Now looking towards an alternate mission.
One of the news broadcasters gave us a 10% chance. My wife happened to hear about it.
I really wouldn't want to make another flight, but I don't really know what he's going to do. It's up to him.
You would not want him to make another flight?
Well, after this, I don't think I would, no.
Mrs. Lovell got her way, and this was his last mission.
We tried to figure out, what happened. If I had just waited for some miracle, I'd still be up there.
Best thing we can do now is just to listen and hope.
And then came the most dangerous part of the mission, re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
There they are. There they are. They've made it.
It was one of NASA's finest moments, led by one of its most experienced and heroic astronauts.
Remembering the astronaut Jim Lovell, who has died at the age of 97. Now, while most of us were sleeping, a group of music lovers were camped out overnight in the Royal Albert Hall for the first overnight BBC prom in more than 40 years. The show was hosted by Anna Lapwood, the organist and TikTok star, as Barry Caffrey now reports.
It was a particularly special night at the Royal Albert Hall. The BBC Proms held their first overnight concert there since 1983. And these people were lucky enough to attend.
It's crazy. I don't know why we're doing it. We have school, we have to work, and we are staying up all night, and we don't care.
This is something totally different and awesome. It's a big adventure. I want to be part of it, yeah.
It feels very full, despite the fact that there are empty seats, because most people aren't crazy enough to stay here overnight. We had some really fun stuff earlier, people dancing and everything, and then we've had some really calm, solo music with everyone sort of sleeping on the floor and relaxing.
Last night's show, called From Dark Till Dawn, began at 11 o'clock and featured an eclectic lineup of performances hosted and co-curated by organist and conductor Anna Lapwood.
What I really wanted was to give people the chance to experience the magic of this place overnight, because I think there's a sense of timelessness when you're in here for that long, and you genuinely have no idea what time it is because there are no windows, and so you just go into this sort of flow state, immersing yourself in whatever happens to be going on in the room at the time. And in this case, we had some pretty wonderful music going on.
This year's BBC Proms season lasts for 8 weeks and features 86 concerts, including 25 televised proms. Last night's performance, though, the only one to run through the night. Barry Caffrey, BBC News.
What a fantastic experience. Well, from one brilliant experience to another. For 3 weeks in August, the Scottish city of Edinburgh becomes the world's most vibrant stage. The Fringe is officially underway with performances from almost 4,000 shows and more than 60 countries, putting on theatre, comedy, circus and more. Well, our team is right in the heart of it all. We'll be bringing you the best of the festival over the next few days, and my colleague Courtney Bembridge is there.
I've been talking all morning about some of the acts that we're meeting here at Edinburgh Festival Fringe. So I'm going to take this hour just to take a break and just let's get in and have a look at who we've got here. Take it away. Oh! Wow, okay. That was Theo from Flip Fabrique. They've come all the way from Quebec and they're one of the thousands of performers here at Edinburgh Festival Fringe. I love the way you just start off that chat. You're not even out of breath.
Thank you. Oh, no.
This is your first ever Fringe. How are you finding it?
Yes, this is our first ever Fringe. I absolutely love it. It's so cool to be able to perform here and to see all the shows, and it's an incredible festival. I'm so happy to be here.
Have you ever been to a show like this, a kind of festival like this before?
Never a festival quite like this. I don't think a festival like this exists anywhere.
We had a previous guest describe it as the Olympic Games of festivals.
Just take a step back here. These guys.
Wow.
No, right here, next to me. Yeah. We'll keep talking. They're going to do a little trick.
Okay. It's all happening here. There's no such thing as a boring chat.
Yeah, and this is the kind of stuff that you can see at 6 Degrees by Flip Fabrique here in the Meadows. You can see acrobatics, you can see comedy, you can see juggling. There are all sorts of things. Right here, where I'm going to teach you some juggling. If someone could grab me some boxes. I'm going to try and teach you a little trick.
This is not a jolly. I know you guys are thinking that this was really easy, but I'm learning here, so.
All right, so I'm going to have you take 3.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you a little demonstration on how it works. So this is called cigar box juggling.
Yes.
And it's a kind of juggling that comes from vaudeville. It's an old style of juggling, and this is what it is.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You use 2 boxes in your hands, and you juggle with them. We're not going to do that quite yet. I'm going to teach you some basics.
I have no coordination, so
that's
this is going to be really tough.
That's A-okay.
Okay.
Start off, just put them in a line on the ground.
Okay, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Grab the boxes.
Grab the boxes.
Okay. First thing, super easy. Take 1 box, just turn it on the side.
Oh!
Yes! Yes! All right, turn it back. Yes, all right.
Close.
All right, other side.
Okay.
Boom.
Oh gosh, I'm getting more and more out of whack.
Yep, boom. All right, one more, ready? You're gonna take the middle box and it's gonna do a spin. Big spin like that. Close enough. Again. You're here. Another quarter spin.
Oh no! Oh God! See, this is why I'm in this job and you're in this job, Theo.
Exactly.
Let's see. You take it away. If you've just tuned in to BBC News and wondering what you're looking at, this is Flip Fabrique. They've come from Quebec. They're one of thousands of performances here. You've got to tell me a little bit more about how audiences are finding this show, because this is just a taster of it, but obviously when you're in the venue, it's...
Yeah, so far audiences have really loved the show. The audiences here at Edinburgh Fringe have been absolutely incredible. And they've really liked the show. We're in the beautiful the Lafayette tent. It's a beautiful space to perform, a beautiful venue, and the show fits in perfectly there. So this is just a little taste of it, but if you come to see the show, there's so much more. Beautiful lighting, amazing music, and even more stunning acrobatics.
Fantastic. And do you guys do this full time? Like, is this your...
This is our job.
Yeah. Oh,
as weird as it is.
And how much preparation goes into something like Fringe?
Into something like Fringe, quite a bit. You know, we prepare our bodies and our skills, you know, our whole lives, but then we have quite a bit of time to rehearse the show and learn the show and try and perfect it for the audiences here.
Well, we still have a little bit more time. Is there anything else you want to perform for us?
Yeah, I can show you one final thing with the boxes here. Actually, I'll have you take the boxes.
1 minute.
Let's do a come across. Yeah. We're going to show you a big acrobatic trick. You can wear my hat.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All right, one more little taste of what you can see from Flip Fabrique, 6 Degrees at the Edinburgh Fringe.
This is BBC News live from Edinburgh Fringe. And I've ended up with a borrowed hat and 6 cigar boxes. So who knows what we're going to happen next hour? We'll have to see.
I expect nothing less from my colleague there, Courtney Bembridge. I've never been. Got to get myself up there. You're with BBC News.
Thwaites Glacier, it's an incredibly alluring and attractive place to go. I was really excited to visit because every coastline in the world will be changed by what happens in that part of Antarctica. So it's all the more important that we get there with our cameras and show people the changes that are taking place.
So we've been filming out here for an hour and a half and this is the result. And it gives you an idea of why it's so hard to operate here.
But there's also a story about getting to where we're going. It took us 5 weeks to get to the front of the glacier. Only 4 people had ever been there before.
It has taken years of preparation to get the scientists out here.
And because of all the delays, what I didn't expect was to be camping on ice for 5 weeks.
It's shocking, and you know we should all be upset by what's happening here.
This is a really important story. This is something people need to know. And if we can understand it, we can do something about it.
Live from London, I'm Kasia Madeira. This is BBC News. Police say they've made 150 arrests in London at a demonstration in support of the proscribed group Palestine Action. President Zelensky rules out surrendering land to Russia as Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin prepare for face-to-face talks. Israel hits back at worldwide criticism against its plan to take control of Gaza City. Opponents warning the move would lead to more bloodshed. NASA astronauts are returning to Earth after a 5-month mission to the International Space Station. We're expecting splashdown off the California coast.
And I'm Courtney Bembridge, live from the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. We're meeting as many of the performers as we can. Next up, it's acrobats.
Welcome. Over 150 people have been arrested after the largest protest over the banned group Palestine Action was organised in London. The group was recently prescribed as a terror organisation. Holding placards in support, at least 600 people gathered in Parliament Square. The Metropolitan Police said it would arrest anyone expressing support for this group. Membership or support of Palestine Action is now punishable by up to 14 years in prison. Well, my colleague Frankie McCamley was at this protest. So, Frankie, just talk us through what happened today.
Well, we arrived at about midday, and that was about an hour before this protest was due to start. And we were just looking around, and you could see lots of people sat there waiting. They had these pieces of white card, which we know they were told to bring along with a black marker to write these signs a little bit further on when the action started. But more noticeably at this time, you could see hundreds of police officers being drafted in around Parliament Square. They were lining the square. They were standing in rows. They were ready. We heard one of the briefings where the police officers were told, if you see anyone supporting Palestine Action, then you will make the arrest. So we knew arrests were going to happen, and we could see people ready to start with this protest. So it was very tense. And then at about 1 o'clock, when the Big Ben chimed, people filled the square. There were hundreds of people. They sat down and they started writing out their signs, which said, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action. And they were sat there and they were all sitting quite quietly. Around the square, though, there was a lot more noise and there was a lot more tension. And the police started by arresting people outside of the square. And they were either carrying people out or walking people out if people would get up and go. And there were hundreds of people there, and they just kept making arrest after arrest. It was quite surreal to watch. Once they'd cleared all the crowds from around the square, they then went into the middle of the square and started picking people up one by one. And like you say there, the police have now said 150 arrests were made. But I left not that long ago, and police were still arresting people. I think that number, Cassia, is only going to go up.
Yeah, so we're getting updates from the Metropolitan Police, and of course we'll keep everybody updated. But just in terms of the history to this, Palestine Action was prescribed earlier on this year. Why?
Well, MPs voted in June to prescribe this group as a terror organisation, and that was following activists breaking into RAF Bryce Norton. They sprayed 2 aircrafts and caused what has been cited as £7 million worth of damage. The Home Office has also said that they made this decision to prescribe this group as a terror organisation following what they have said as strong security advice, following what they say, serious attacks the group had committed involving violence, significant injuries and extensive criminal damage. But as you can see today, so much support out there, people there writing these signs, very happy, very willing to be arrested and to make a stance against this decision by the Home Office.
OK, 150 people arrested so far. Frankie, any updates, you'll bring them to us. Frankie McCamley, thank you so much. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has ruled out giving up any land to Russia in exchange for peace as Donald Trump prepares for talks next Friday with Vladimir Putin. Mr. Trump suggested that any deal on how to end the war would involve the swapping of territories. But President Zelensky says that peace talks without him would not achieve anything. And he's spoken with the UK's Sir Keir Starmer today. And in just the last few hours, it's been emerging that the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy and the US Vice President JD Vance are hosting a meeting of national security advisors from Europe, from Ukraine and the US at the Foreign Secretary's official residence in Kent. Joe Inwood reports.
It's just after dark at a small medical stabilisation point, and already 3 ambulances have arrived. They get dozens of casualties a night, almost all caused by drones.
A drone targeted us and we all started running.
The drone injured my comrade's leg, but at least everyone survived.
Tens of thousands of Ukrainians have been killed by Russia's invasion of their country. Donald Trump says he is the man to bring all this to an end. Last night he announced he would meet President Putin face to face.
President Putin, I believe, wants to see peace, and Zelensky wants to see peace. Now, President Zelensky has to get all of his everything he needs, because he's going to have to get ready to sign something.
It's now been confirmed that Presidents Trump and Putin, but not Zelensky, will meet next week in Alaska, a territory the US purchased from Russia just over a century and a half ago. And territory will be top of the agenda. Russia currently occupies about 20% of Ukraine. Crimea, which it captured in 2014. Almost all of Luhansk, most of Donetsk, and significant parts of both Zaporizhia and Kherson. Ukraine, meanwhile, says it still holds a small piece of Russian land in Kursk, captured in a surprise offensive last year.
It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
Ever since his fiery exchange in the White House, President Zelensky has been keen not to antagonize Donald Trump and was careful to avoid doing so in his response overnight.
Ukrainians will not gift their land to the occupier. Ukraine is ready for real decisions that can bring peace. Any decisions that are against us, any decisions that are without Ukraine, are at the same time decisions against peace.
At Kharkiv Cemetery, another Ukrainian soldier is buried. The vast cost of this war is written in blue and yellow. Any negotiated peace will require compromise from both sides, but it will be Ukraine that will be asked to give up land that it has sacrificed so much to defend. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Well, our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale told us more about how Ukraine feels not having a seat at that table.
This is what always worried President Zelensky, and to be honest, worried a lot of European leaders, that there would be a deal done between Presidents Trump and President Putin without President Zelensky present. Now, we know that the Americans are talking to European allies. We know that President Trump has talked to President Putin. And President Zelensky has been careful so far not to criticize President Trump. But clearly he is worried about what is going to be discussed. First of all, over the fact that he is not going to be there. It doesn't seem likely at the moment, that's for sure. And secondly, that there is this talk of swapping territory. Now, the only territory that will be swapped is essentially Ukrainian territory. Yes, Ukraine may have a sliver of Kursk, but it's not much to bargain with, and it looks like that Ukraine would have to give up claims, from what we're hearing, to the entire Donbass, which it's been fighting hard for, losing tens of thousands of troops the last, not just 3.5 years, but remember, since 2014. So I think there's a lot of concern here as to what will happen at that meeting. That is why President Zelensky's also been talking to European leaders, trying to shore up support. They too, in the past, have said no decisions without Ukraine. The question is, will they stand up to Donald Trump? Will they be having a voice in these negotiations? Because clearly Donald Trump wants to do a deal.
So the appetite there is for Donald Trump to do a deal, but we know that President Zelensky has been doing, it's against the constitution of Ukraine to secede any territory, but arguably, potentially, referendums could throw that, but within those territories that are occupied by Russia at the moment, there's no hope of having any form of referendum.
Well, the only referendum that have occurred in those occupied territories are Russian-held referenda, which essentially have backed the decision of Russia to invade. It's no surprise. They are not democratic elections, and Ukraine has been highly critical of that. But essentially, yes, the line from President Zelensky is the constitution of Ukraine is clear. It cannot be changed. And that is about the sovereignty of all Ukrainian territory. That includes Crimea, which I don't think most Ukrainians believe they're going to get back anytime soon. But it's this idea of actually saying, yes, Russia can have these territories. What Ukraine, I think, thought is that, yes, there may be a problem in getting some of these territories back immediately, but they'd be up for discussion in the future. And that doesn't seem to be the case. I think the one thing that you can say about President Trump and what he said so far is he's saying that it'll be to the betterment of both sides. So the suggestion there is that Russia would have to withdraw perhaps from Zaporizhia region, which it's in, or Kherson, or make some sort of compromise there. And those have been red lines for President Putin. So is President Putin backing down on that? We don't know. And I think the fear always with Ukraine is that whatever President Putin says, you can't trust him. And that's the bottom line.
Our thanks to Jonathan Beale there speaking to me from Kiev. International opposition continues to grow to Israel's decision to take over Gaza City, with the UN Security Council set to hold an emergency meeting on Sunday. The Secretary-General called the military escalation dangerous, saying that it risks many lives, including those of the remaining Israeli hostages. Well, the foreign ministers of the UK, Italy, Germany, Australia and New Zealand have issued a joint statement strongly rejecting Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to expand the war in Gaza. They say that it will aggravate the catastrophic humanitarian situation, endanger the lives of the hostages and further risk the mass displacement of civilians, adding any attempts at annexation or a settlement extension would violate international law. Israel's defended the decision to escalate its military expansion in Gaza, with Defence Minister Israel Katz saying that international partners who condemned Israel would not weaken their resolve to defeat Hamas. Well, currently, Israeli forces have control of around 75% of the territory. The new plans to take over Gaza City, home to around 1 million Palestinians. Well, this satellite map shows the density of the area 2 years ago, while this image, taken more recently, shows some parts have been destroyed in the war, while other areas remain largely intact. Israel does not allow international journalists, including the BBC, into Gaza. We have to rely on trusted freelancers in the territory. Earlier, I spoke to Yusra Abu Sharek, who's an aid worker for the charity Inara, and Yusra gave her reaction to the news that Israel has approved an expansion of its military offensive in Gaza, starting in Gaza City, where she's based.
Yes, the situation on the ground, the people are so immersed in finding something to eat after almost 4 months of complete closure of all crossings and borders. Some trucks are entering Gaza Strip and people are celebrating just having sugar. Imagine having sugar after 4 months of have nothing in the market. And these very few trucks that entering Gaza Strip and being looted are not enough. While people in Gaza are starved, and especially vulnerable groups like children, elderly, and patients, we hear about like decisions on fully ground and vision to Gaza Strip. Honestly, from the ground of the Gaza Strip, people are not prepared for a new round of displacement after being continuously displaced for 15 months. Now they are displaced, homeless, starved. They don't have any energy to go anywhere. And they tested the displacement. They tested that there is no single spot in the whole Gaza Strip that's safe. So everyone in Gaza Strip curious about this plan, but the most important thing that they are focusing on right now is securing their food, because the malnutrition symptoms are obvious on every single one in Gaza Strip. We are talking about like at least 71,000 children who have acute malnutrition. We have like 55,000 at least out of 2 million people, I'm talking, who are pregnant women who are facing a very serious situation and conditions when it comes not only malnutrition but also health and the risk on safe delivery, knowing that the healthcare system is collapsed in Gaza Strip. So the situation on the ground in Gaza Strip is unimaginable. Even like imagine when the mothers come to the clinic we are operating here in Gaza City, I started to realize that even the infants, when I banter with them and tickle with them, they don't give any reaction. They look at one direction only. They are not active. So the situation on the ground is catastrophic.
Yusra Abu Sharek there from the charity Inara talking to me from Gaza City. A ceremony has been held in Nagasaki to mark the 80th anniversary of the United States dropping an atomic bomb on the Japanese city. Around 74,000 people were killed by this second nuclear strike on Japan, which hastened the end of World War II. Many people died later from radiation sickness, bringing the final number of those killed in both Nagasaki and Hiroshima to over 200,000. Shaima Halil reports.
At 11:02 Japan time, Nagasaki fell into silent prayers as the peace bell tolled, marking the moment the US dropped an atomic bomb on the city, the second to hit the country. Survivors and dignitaries gathered in a solemn memorial ceremony in the Peace Park, remembering the dead and cautioning the living.
80 years on. Who expected this world? This fight must end now, immediately. No more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki, no more wars.
The atomic bomb, codenamed Fat Man, was bigger and more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima 3 days before. It wiped out whole communities in seconds, killing tens of thousands instantly, with thousands more suffering from the effects of toxic radiation. Japan is the only nation to have experienced the devastating impact of nuclear warfare. It hastened the country's surrender and the end of the Second World War. But for people here, this is not just about the past.
Being in a place like this really makes me wish for a more peaceful world, especially with all the wars and crises that are going on right now.
It makes me realize that it wasn't all that long ago. But still, as the days and years go by, more people might start to forget about the war, thinking of it as something from the distant past. When I think about that, it makes me think all the more that it's something we must never forget.
Many leaders or politicians around the world say that possessing nuclear weapons is for deterrence or for peace, but I strongly believe that such things should never be tolerated.
Last year, a group representing survivors of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki won the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to abolish nuclear weapons, many expressing deep concerns about the ongoing wars in Gaza and Ukraine and the proliferation of nuclear armament. 80 years ago, victims begged for water as their skin burned. At the ceremony, water offerings were made in a show of respect to those who perished in nuclear fire. Events ended with a song by school children, a message of peace from a city that rose from the ashes of nuclear war. Shaima Khalil, BBC News, Tokyo.
And of course, we have much more on that anniversary on our website as well. But now I'm going to take you live to SpaceX Mission Control in California, because we are continuing to monitor the eventual splashdown of the SpaceX Dragon capsule that is on its way back to Earth from the International Space Station, where the crew have spent around 5 months on rotation at that mission in the orbiting lab of the International Space Station. So we're continuing to monitor mission control there for SpaceX. Let's have a little listen in. Always fun to hear the conversations happens with the tech team.
But we have those suits just in case, and the suits are flame resistant. They have 3D printed helmets which are attached. Basically, the IVA intravehicular suits are used for just inside of the spacecraft, so not like the EVA suits that we were showing earlier. They're only used for inside of the spacecraft, and again, they help flow nitrox through the suit, help keep the crew cool, as well as providing them oxygen through these dynamic events as they're coming back down to Earth.
And during Crew 11's launch, we actually noticed Mike Fink has
some details as to what the crew are wearing in order to protect themselves. Of course, it's a 4-person crew, 4 astronauts. They include 2 from the United States, Nicole Ayers and Anne McLean, and also an astronaut from Japan, Takuya Onishi, and a Russian cosmonaut, harking back to the days of the Soviet Union when there was that space race, and you described the astronauts from the US, but they were cosmonauts from Russia, and that's Kirill Peskov, who are due to splash down on the site just off the California coast within roughly about 25 minutes or so. We're expecting them to come down. They were up there for around 5 months at the International Space Station, so we're expecting that splashdown very shortly. So let's move away from there and come closer to Earth, Scotland in fact, because for the past 3 weeks in August, the Scottish city of Edinburgh becomes the world's most vibrant stage. The Fringe is officially underway with performances from almost 4,000 shows and from more than 60 countries, putting on theatre, comedy, circus and much, much more. And our team is right in the heart of all of this, bringing you the very best. So let's cross over to my colleague Courtney Bembridge, who is live there now. Courtney, we've been really enjoying your reports. What have you got for us this hour?
Well, Kasia, I'm not in space, but I think this is the next best thing. I am at the Circus Hub, and you might be able to guess, if you can have a look behind me at what's going on, why it's called that. We have Circa Wolf. They are an acrobatic act. I'm going to get out of the way. So this is an Australian company. I'm not biased, I promise. They're just the best. And this is just a taste of what they perform every night almost here in Edinburgh at the Fringe. This festival goes for 3.5 weeks, so you can imagine how tiring it is. There's quite a crowd that has gathered here. They've all fallen silent. It's just me yapping away as everyone watches this. And we're going to see something pretty incredible here. Here we go. I'm seeing this for the first time too. Wow. So that is Circa Wolf. I've got 2 of the performers to help talk us through what else we're seeing here. So talk us through this kind of performance. What does it take to kind of prepare something like this?
So yeah, this is a part of our show Wolf. And yeah, well, we are all an ensemble from Brisbane, Australia. And this takes, well, we prepared the show for about 2 months. That was our creation time. And yeah, we all have different backgrounds. And yeah, we rehearse together, and then this is an ensemble, so we all spend a lot of time working together in order to trust each other and know what we're all doing very well.
Yeah, I imagine trust is very important. And what about the audiences? How have they been?
Yeah, the audiences have been great. You know, I think bringing a show to Edinburgh Fringe as well is always an interesting process, but I feel like it's a familiar audience. They know what they're watching, they know what they like, they know what they don't, and we've been doing pretty good so far, which is nice. And yeah, it's like Edinburgh Fringe's audience is great.
It's another guest described it to us as the Olympic Games of festivals, so that is amazing.
Feels like a big family gathering in a way.
Well, if we can come in here and this might be a bit of the finale. I'm not sure if you can see the crowd gathering here, but there's almost as many people watching as there would be in the tent, I'm guessing. This is Circa Wolf. One of thousands of performances on in the month of August here in Edinburgh. Oh. Well done, guys. That's amazing. So, you guys, what's next now? You've got to go and prepare a show?
Exactly. We're going to go back to our warm-up and go through a few skills that we're going to do in our performance, make sure everything is fine, and then we're going to hit the stage.
Fantastic. That's it from us here at the Circus Hub.
Courtney, thank you so much, and please thank your guests. What a brilliant performance there. Nobody fell, which is always good when it comes to live television. Now, thanks to Courtney Bembridge there and the crew of Circa Wolf, who are appearing at the Fringe. Much more from Courtney throughout the day. I'm back in just a few moments' time. You're with BBC News. Hello, welcome. You're with BBC News. Our headlines. London's Metropolitan Police say they've made 150 arrests at a mass demonstration in the capital in support of the proscribed group Palestine Action. The government recently designated it a terror organisation, making membership or support of the group now punishable by up to 14 years in prison. President Zelensky rules out surrendering land to President Putin, saying Russia must not be rewarded for its invasion of his country. It comes as Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin prepare for face-to-face talks on the future of the war in Ukraine. NASA astronauts are returning to Earth after a 5-month mission to the International Space Station. They're expected to splash down off the California coast. The team blasted off back in March and completed dozens of science experiments during their time in low Earth orbit.
Engineering's moved inside the body to innovate like never before. Now on BBC News, for a special event in front of a large audience in London, 3 leading biomedical engineers join Caroline Steele to discuss exploring the human, the engineers.
Hello, I'm Caroline Steele. This is the BBC World Service, and welcome to the Engineers. This year, I'm at the Royal Geographical Society in London, and with our partners, the Royal Commission 1851, we've brought together 3 world-leading pioneers, navigating the body in new ways and breaking fresh ground in biomedicine. And here to help me explore the work of these fascinating engineers, we have a delightful audience. Audience, give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you. Surgery can be invasive. Pills are a blunt tool. But what if we could borrow the body's neural pathways and electrically nudge its responses to MS or diabetes? And what if we could guide drugs through our veins to deliver them exactly where they're needed? And paralysis can leave some people with locked-in syndrome, where they can't communicate. What if there was a non-invasive way to turn their thoughts into words? Thanks to our 3 world-leading engineers, these scenarios are becoming new realities. Tom Oxley, originally from Australia, is a neural engineer and professorial fellow at Melbourne Medical School. He is also founding CEO of Synchron, which has successfully implanted brain-computer interfaces in 10 patients worldwide. Eleanor Stride is from the UK. She is Professor of Biomaterials at the University of Oxford, specialising in the creation of tiny devices for targeted drug delivery. Her innovation of delivering drugs via bubbles in the bloodstream is going to human trials later this year. Khalil Ramadi is from the United Arab Emirates. He is Assistant Professor of Bioengineering at New York University. His electrocuticle pill, designed to deliver nudges from the gut to the brain, is being developed at his Ramadi lab for advanced neuroengineering and translational medicine in Abu Dhabi. Please do join me in welcoming them all. Tom, your first experience of a patient with locked-in syndrome went on to inspire the rest of your work. Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so I work in the field of brain-computer interfaces, BCI, implantable BCI. There's a very famous company you probably heard of. We're a famous entrepreneur driving this field forward, but we've actually been doing this a little bit longer. And we set out on a mission to find a way to deliver electronics into the brain without disturbing the local natural architecture of the head and the body. And yeah, so in my early clinical career in my neurology training, I had a young man around my age now, early 40s, who had a family of 3, and he had a stroke. And the stroke was actually a tiny stroke in a part of the brainstem called the pons that carries all the motor fibers out of the brain. About 20% of your brain is made up around controlling the movement of your muscles. I'm using my mouth, I'm using my body. And if you cut that fiber, then you can't control your body, but the rest of your brain is working. And so it was horrific because, and that's still happening now, there's no therapy for people who have major strokes. There's no treatment for broken nervous systems. So I think the great hope with BCI is that this technology can bypass the failed body where the brain is still active. Yeah.
Very clever. Thank you, Tom. Eleanor, you've developed a new approach because the conventional means of pills and injections isn't super efficient. Is that right?
That's right. So if you take a pill or you have an injection, you are putting the drug everywhere in your body. Your bloodstream is there to carry material around, which if it's food and oxygen is a good thing. Unfortunately, that means the amount of a drug that actually makes it to a particular target site is less than 1%. That A might not be enough. And obviously the rest of your tissue is absorbing that drug. And with very toxic drugs, such as used for treating cancer, that can give you very severe side effects.
And one solution for that might be bubbles, right? Why are bubbles a solution?
Well, that's what we're hoping. So what we're actually doing is repurposing the bubbles as drug delivery systems. So these are tiny little bubbles of gas. They're about a 50th of a human hair, so they can safely go through your blood vessels. Because they are so tiny, we have to stabilize them. So they've got an outer coating of a protein or some very biocompatible material. And we use that to also encapsulate drugs. So you've got this little ball of gas. It travels through the bloodstream, the drug doesn't do anything, and then we focus the ultrasound at the target site to break the bubble open, and we release the drug just in that site. So we're hoping to get much more of the drug to the right spot and minimize the rest of the body.
Okay, so the bubbles travel all the way around the body, but you just burst them at the exact right point, so you're not sort of exposing everywhere to something potentially harmful.
Exactly.
Ah, very clever. Khalil, your interest in engineering the brain led you to look at the gut. Some people might find that jump surprising.
I understand where that comes from. Colloquially, the gut is known in our field as the quote-unquote little brain. It has the second largest number of neurons in our body after our brain. And essentially, you can disconnect these neurons from the brain and your gut can still function. You can still digest things. You don't feel hungry quite as well or feel full. Some of that feedback is lost, but at least the gut is able to function entirely with its own little brain.
Wow.
From an engineering standpoint, that's also really attractive to us because all of a sudden there is no hole, right? We swallow pills every day for therapeutic purposes, and those pills basically come into contact with the gut lining, which has all the neurons.
Very clever. Thank you. Tom, your brain implant is called Stentrode, and it detects changes in brain activity. And like Eleanor, you're making use of our blood vessels. Could you tell me about the non-invasive way that you get this implant into people's brains?
Yeah, so the motor cortex command center of the brain is pretty well understood in the way it controls movement. So if you have a small enough sensor above a certain region of the brain, there's a part that controls your mouth, part controls your hand, part controls your foot, part controls various parts of your body. So if you have a sensor over that part of the brain, you see the brain, it looks like a lightning storm in voltage potential. So it's electrical activity in the brain. So detected with a voltage sensor, you can then train an algorithm to know that, in that moment, you're trying to, say, open and close your hand. Once you've trained an algorithm on that, you can then pull it out and send commands like through Bluetooth to a system that would push a cursor around a screen or make selections on a screen.
How do you do that in a not very invasive way? Because sort of instinctively hearing, device in a vein on the top of your brain, that sounds like it's going to be pretty invasive. What's the way that you insert it?
So our first generation is just targeting the safest, largest, most accessible blood vessel called the superior sagittal sinus, the one running down the middle. We enter the jugular vein in the neck, thread the device up through a catheter, and then connect the lead that's coming out of the neck to a device that looks like a pacemaker box that sits under the skin in the chest and communicates the brain information out of the body.
Great, thank you. And Khalil, if Tom used the back door to the brain, your way is sort of similarly surprising. Could you tell me a bit about the early experiments which showed potential for influencing the brain via the digestive system?
We did a series of early experiments. We started just zapping little pieces of stomach, and then we looked at blood levels of different GI hormones. And the one that popped out really interestingly was this robust increase in a hormone called ghrelin. So ghrelin is a hunger-promoting hormone. Basically, the minute you take a bite of something, it tanks all the way to zero. And then as you get hungrier and hungrier, or more time has elapsed since your last meal, ghrelin goes up, telling you to go eat. We were able to deliver this stimulus to the stomach and get repeated and robust increases in the short term of this hormone ghrelin, which was really, I think validating some of our approach.
And so that led you to create your pill, your little device called Flash. So what's it look like? Could you kind of paint a bit of a picture for us?
Yeah, so if you, I'm sure some people in the audience take supplements. If any of you take your omega-3 capsules, so you can think of it as about that size, but instead of containing chemicals, it contains electronics. And so on the outside, what you see in the picture are circumferentially wound electrodes, basically tiny metal wires. And inside we have a battery, some electronics to basically shape what the pulse that you receive. They're like microzaps that you basically can't feel. You swallow this, it has about enough energy to stimulate for about 30 minutes, and then it passes along its way.
That's fascinating inspiration. Eleanor, you were tasked with including oxygen in the bubbles which you're using to deliver drugs. Why is oxygen important, and why was that such a challenge?
Yeah. So one of the challenges actually in a lot of diseases, but cancer particularly, is because tumors grow very quickly, you end up with a rubbish blood supply. There aren't enough blood vessels in the tumor. And so areas get completely starved of oxygen. And the problem when you starve cells of oxygen is they start behaving very strangely. They start going effectively into a zombie state, and it's very, very difficult to kill them. So drugs don't work, radiotherapy doesn't work, our own immune system can't kill these cancer cells. So if we could deliver oxygen simultaneously with the drug, we could temporarily reverse that and hopefully make the cancer cells easier to kill.
That's sort of counterintuitive, because in a way you're sort of trying to boost the cancer cells, wake them up in order to fight them.
Yes, exactly. So the reason it's difficult is that oxygen is a very, very small molecule. It's very soluble. We have a very, very good way throughout the body of distributing it, which is exactly the opposite from the types of gas we usually put in our bubbles. We usually use something incredibly inert, incredibly heavy that isn't going to go anywhere. I gave my poor PhD student many months of misery in the laboratory as we desperately tried to keep this gas inside our bubbles, and they didn't. Every time we made them, they just fell apart immediately.
That's so interesting, because you'd think putting oxygen in a bubble is easier than putting some complex drug in a bubble, but that's actually where things got really difficult.
Yeah, and luckily after many months and a lot of brainstorming in the entire team, we figured out, well, right, we need to completely change the coating. We've got to make it much more gas tight, so we keep that. And actually in the end, what we started doing was making the bubbles the old way with our very heavy gas, and then partially substitute the oxygen. And actually it turned out the gas we've been using is a really, really good solubilizer of oxygen, and it was holding it all together.
Tom, your team became the first in the world to receive approval for human trials of a permanently implanted brain-computer interface. Could you give me an example of a patient that you've worked with and what you've been able to do with them?
It's been a journey of different users doing different things. Rodney has most recently been, as well as Mark in Pittsburgh, has been using the latest Bluetooth profile, which we have worked on with Apple, a new HID, human interface device, which is a language for Bluetooth. So there's an HID for a keyboard, there's an HID for a mouse, there's an HID for an eye tracking system. There's now going to be an HID Bluetooth for brain control. So up to this point, we've been tricking the computer into thinking the brain signals coming in were coming from a keyboard or a mouse. Now we have a ability to build different features that are truly brain derived.
Thank you, Tom. Audience, it's your turn. Does anyone have a question about something that we've discussed so far? Okay, we've got quite a few hands. Let's start with the lady in the middle. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name's Cheryl. I would like to know if with the bubbles you've targeted them at other cells in the body besides cancer ones.
Yep.
Eleanor, I think that's one for you.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, so we're increasingly looking at treating stroke. So actually delivering the drugs that are clot busting, because those are also horribly, horribly toxic. And we've got a big project on delivering antibiotics, because again, antibiotics are fantastic, but they wipe out all the bacteria in your body. And most of the bacteria in our body are really, really important and really useful. So if we can target that delivery. So hopefully next year, we're actually going to be trialing this in chronic wounds with antibiotics.
Anyone got a question for Khalil or Tom? The person over here on the left. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name's Rushi. It's a question for Leo. You've got the pills. Presumably you recover them as they come out. Do you foresee a time when they're going to be able to be dissolve in some way or something like that?
Yeah, it's my favorite question. Yes, retrieval is a problem. So right now, most of the electronics that we have are very much inorganic materials that don't necessarily degrade very well in the body. And essentially, you either have to retrieve them or flush them down the toilet. And so that obviously poses issues, especially when you think about scaling up. There's a sort of parallel push towards making electronics that are not just ingestible, but edible. And so there you are trying to sort of make these same tools, but from food grade materials. And so you can imagine how that is a lot more conducive to what you're describing. Right now, those two fields are starting to talk to each other.
Thank you so much for your questions. Eleanor, your bubble technology is going to human trials in October. What are you hoping for?
That's the plan. This is subject to paperwork as always. So we have tested the safety of the bubbles already. So we're fairly confident, but this will be the first time actually with a chemotherapy drug. This will be in breast cancer. So these are patients who are going to have surgery anyway. So we'll take the tumors out and actually quantify whether we have succeeded in delivering more drug, and hopefully whether that's led to more cancer cell death. So that's fingers crossed.
It's very exciting and could, save many, many lives. How far off this being available to the general public do you think we are?
This is a super question. So I think 15 years ago, I thought we were 5 years away. At least now the gap is closing. We're probably looking at 10 years.
Another 10 years. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Khalil, your invention is slightly less far along, but the implications of it could be huge. Could you tell me a little bit about the different conditions that this pill could be used to treat?
So the gut is this fascinating organ that so many other organ systems overlap in. We have our metabolic system, our endocrine system, our hunger and satiety system, our immune system. And so what that means from a disease implication, it means different conditions, different eating disorders, potentially obesity. Those are all sort of indications that we are looking at. Ozempic, watch out. If you go a little bit further down in the gut, you get to the small intestine. That's a little more where metabolism happens. And so there, indications potentially like diabetes become slightly more relevant. Obviously, super complex disease. Depending on where we go, I think the indications are a little varied.
Thank you. Tom, so far we've focused on how Stentrode can help with conditions like locked-in syndrome. What are the other possibilities for it? Where do you see Stentrode going in the future?
So if the first wave of implantable BCIs is in the domain of motor control, then the spectrum of conditions that cause motor impairment could potentially benefit. So neurodegeneration, motor neuron disease, stroke, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, spinal cord injury, head injury, severe arthritis. There are many conditions that stop you being able to engage in the physical and technological world. So I think as the technology moves towards other cortical domains, it will move into the domain of speech, into the domain of vision, hearing. And then what I think is really interesting is emotional content. So a large portion of your frontal lobe is made up of reacting to the world, what annoys you, what makes you happy, what frustrates you, all of those emotions that are embedded in nonverbal communication. And there are many conditions such as autism and many others where the challenge of communicating your emotional state this technology could really help.
Eleanor, we've talked a lot about chemotherapy, but do you see your bubbles helping with other areas of medicine?
Absolutely. So I think I mentioned earlier, antimicrobial resistance is a really, really terrifying problem that we need to do something about quickly. The other sort of allied challenge with bacterial infections is bacteria grow these horrible things called biofilms. So if you scrape your teeth, it's the horrible goo that comes off on your fingernail. Bacteria live in these biofilms, and it's really hard to get the drugs into them to actually kill them off. So again, using the bubbles, you get this mechanical effect. You can actually break up the biofilm to get the drug into the bacteria and kill them as well. So that's something we're very excited about. I say we're hopefully testing this next year, so fingers crossed.
Oh, fingers crossed. Tom, you must be aware of the ethical issues with interpreting people's brainwaves. I mean, a large proportion of the population already think that we have microchips in our brains. How do you deal with those ethical concerns?
So I think about this a lot. I think there are concerns. The first thing I'll say on privacy, if anyone's watched Black Mirror, I think it's that the Brits are to blame for Black Mirror. The dystopic narrative on where BCI goes in society has some elements of truth to it. I think it's on a long horizon, but the irony around the privacy concern with BCI is that the people in need right now have the exact opposite requirement, because they don't have, if you become paralyzed, you lose your privacy because you now become dependent on someone else. And that's ironically what they're looking for. So you have to give up your brain access to enable this.
Okay, that makes sense. And just back to that Black Mirror episode, which I've seen, there are examples where something small goes wrong in someone's brain, but it has hugely devastating consequences, and they have a chip put into their brain, I guess not massively dissimilar to what you're doing, Tom, and it is able to completely transform their brains, and people are able to live as normal after having had a stroke or something like that. But the issue is people become reliant on a technology that they don't have total control over. And I guess this is probably something that you're considering. You're going to have people dependent on this technology. What safeguarding is in place? How do you ensure that they're still able to use it in 5-10 years' time?
So this issue has come up over several decades in other medical device applications. The first one was probably the cardiac pacemaker, which in the 70s and 80s, when it first appeared, needed multiple iterations and needed lots of support. Probably more recently, there was a widely reported, company that was doing a cortical vision implant. And the company, for whatever reason, wasn't able to continue, and people were left with implants that were no longer supported. So it's a challenging issue. There is the risk that the companies no longer exist. So there's no easy solution. When we consent people, we talk about it. So we talk about it in the consent. I think in a future state, if the technology, I heard Alex Wang, the Scale AI, last week made a comment that he didn't want to have children until they could get an implantable BCI, because otherwise they'll be disadvantaged. And Steve Bannon has been talking about this a little bit in his when he's referenced Neuralink, that in the future, the question is, will there be now a subclass of humans, not a subclass, a different class of humans that have elected to take a technology for the purpose of augmentation? And does that mean they can then participate in society at a level superior, in some way advantageous relative to not? And what will that mean? What will that mean for society? So from that perspective, if there's discrimination on the side of who can't afford the technology, and then there's discrimination on the side of what will it mean for cultural divisions.
Thank you. It's the turn of our audience again. Who has a question on anything we've discussed so far? The man over here in the aisle, and then afterwards we'll go to the lady at the back.
Thank you. As someone that lives with left frontal lobe epilepsy, the delivery of drugs, you've always spoken with the brain and the gut. Is there a correlation between implants, bubble, and the gut? Could the three work together?
Is this a moment for a collaboration? What do you think? Who wants to take this one? Khalil?
Could we work together? Absolutely. I think we met each other a few hours ago, just full disclosure here. And let's just say time flew by, just in terms of when you put geeks together, we just end up having interesting conversations. I don't want to speak for sort of all engineers, but I will say that one thing that really excites me is where there is a problem that is unsolved. And I think that's sort of just kind of the engineering hat. So most of the projects that we embark on start off with what is a problem that is currently underserved or where there's an opportunity to have an impact. And then do we think that we have a novel enough idea to actually think that we can make an impact?
Thank you. And we're going to go to the lady in the center here.
Hello, this is a question for Eleanor. What happens to the bubbles and the drugs inside them that aren't burst when they're targeted at the target organ?
Thank you. No, it's a very good question. So the gas eventually just leaks out and you're left with a tiny little crumpled balloon, essentially, which gets processed by the liver.
Perfect, thank you. I see a few young faces in the audience. Does any one of our younger members want to ask a question? There's someone keen over there in the back wearing a hoodie.
This is quite a light-hearted question, but could you use neural implants to do more realistic VR gaming?
Oh, good question.
I think that'll be one of the first groups that are early adopters for this technology. I'm not joking, and I think the reason it's going to be attractive is, and it's, by the way, US defense, that's why US defense is interested, because you can engage with systems in a more responsive way than what your body can. So you get down your reaction times for technology control. So gamers, maybe.
What interest has it been from US defense? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, actually, the field of BCI started with several $100 million from US defense, from DARPA. That was where our first funding came from. Then over the course of 10 to 15 years, that funding went away. Trump came in and there was more of a focus on soldiers, weapons. So there's less investment now from US defense, but there's been the initial defense interest was helping people who are coming back from desert warfare who'd lost arms, legs and arms, to restore control of prosthetic limbs, and then also to understand post-traumatic stress from head injuries. So that's the origin.
Fantastic question, thank you. Thank you so much for your questions, everyone. I wish we could take more, but I'm afraid we're out of time. That's it for the Engineers Exploring the Human at the Royal Geographical Society in London. I'm Caroline Steele. On behalf of the BBC World Service, our partners, the Royal Commission 1851, and my producer, Charlie Taylor, please join me in giving a warm round of applause for our pioneering engineers, Eleanor Stride, Khalil Ramadi, and Tom Oxley. Thank you very much.
In a 24-hour news cycle, patience can be so frustrating, but it's a crucial tool. I don't rush to be the first. I strive to get it right. I'm Lucy Hockings on BBC News Now.
Live from London, I'm Kasia Madeira. This is BBC News. London's Metropolitan Police say they've made 200 arrests at a mass demonstration in the capital in support of the proscribed group Palestine Action. It comes amid growing international criticism of Israeli plans to take control of Gaza City. Several world leaders warning the move would lead to more bloodshed. President Zelensky rules out surrendering land to Russia as Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin prepare for face-to-face talks. NASA astronauts have returned to Earth after a 5-month mission to the International Space Station, splashing down in the Pacific Ocean just off California.
And in Edinburgh, I'm Courtney Brembridge, bringing you all the action from the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. We've got comedians, clowns, musical comedy. Stay tuned.
Welcome to BBC News. At least 200 people have been arrested after the largest protest over the banned group Palestine Action was organised in London. The group was recently proscribed as a terror organisation. Holding placards in support, at least 600 people gathered in Parliament Square. The Metropolitan Police said that it would arrest anyone expressing support for Palestine Action. Membership or support of the group is now punishable by up to 14 years in prison. Well, my colleague Frankie McCamley was at the protest.
We were just looking around and you could see lots of people sat there waiting. They had these pieces of white card, which we know they were told to bring along with a black marker to write these signs a little bit further on when the action started. But more noticeably at this time, you could see hundreds of police officers being drafted in around Parliament Square. They were lining the square. They were standing in rows. They were ready. We heard one of the briefings where the police officers were told, if you see anyone supporting Palestine Action, then you will make the arrest. So we knew arrests were going to happen and we could see people ready to start with this protest. So it was very tense. And then at about 1 o'clock, when the Big Ben chimed, people filled the square. There were hundreds of people. They sat down and they started writing out their signs, which said, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action. And they were sat there and they were all sitting quite quietly. Around the square, though, there was a lot more noise and there was a lot more tension. And the police started by arresting people outside of the square. And they were either carrying people out or walking people out if people would get up and go. And there were hundreds of people there and they just kept making arrest after arrest. It was quite surreal to watch. Once they'd cleared all the crowds from around the square, they then went into the middle of the square and started picking people up one by one.
Just in terms of the history to this, Palestine Action was proscribed earlier on this year. Why?
Well, MPs voted in June to prescribe this group as a terror organisation, and that was following activists breaking into RAF Bryce Norton. They sprayed 2 aircrafts and caused what has been cited as £7 million worth of damage. The Home Office has also said that they made this decision to prescribe this group as a terror organisation following what they have said as strong security advice, following what they say, serious attacks the group had committed involving violence, significant injuries and extensive criminal damage. But as you can see today, so much support out there, people there writing these signs, very happy, very willing to be arrested and to make a stance against this decision by the Home Office.
Frankie McCamley there, and she was, of course, a little bit earlier on at that protest. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has ruled out giving up any land to Russia in exchange for peace, as Donald Trump prepares for talks next Friday with Vladimir Putin. Mr. Trump suggested that any deal on how to end the war would involve the swapping of territories. But President Zelensky said peace talks without him would not achieve anything. And he spoke with Sir Keir Starmer today. And earlier on today, it emerged that the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy and the US Vice President J.D. Vance hosted a meeting of national security advisors from Europe, Ukraine and the US at the Foreign Secretary's official residence in Kent. Joe Inwood reports.
It's just after dark at a small medical stabilisation point, and already 3 ambulances have arrived. They get dozens of casualties a night, almost all caused by drones.
A drone targeted us, and we all started running. The drone injured my comrade's leg, but at least everyone survived.
Tens of thousands of Ukrainians have been killed by Russia's invasion of their country. Donald Trump says he is the man to bring all this to an end. Last night he announced he would meet President Putin face to face.
President Putin, I believe, wants to see peace, and Zelensky wants to see peace. Now, President Zelensky has to get all of his everything he needs, because he's going to have to get ready to sign something.
It's now been confirmed that Presidents Trump and Putin, but not Zelensky, will meet next week in Alaska, a territory the US purchased from Russia just over a century and a half ago. And territory will be top of the agenda. Russia currently occupies about 20% of Ukraine. Crimea, which it captured in 2014. Almost all of Luhansk, most of Donetsk, and significant parts of both Zaporizhia and Kherson. Ukraine, meanwhile, says it still holds a small piece of Russian land in Kursk, captured in a surprise offensive last year.
It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
Ever since his fiery exchange in the White House, President Zelensky has been keen not to antagonize Donald Trump and was careful to avoid doing so in his response overnight.
Ukrainians will not gift their land to the occupier. Ukraine is ready for real decisions that can bring peace. Any decisions that are against us, any decisions that are without Ukraine, are at the same time decisions against peace.
At Kharkiv Cemetery, another Ukrainian soldier is buried. The vast cost of this war is written in blue and yellow. Any negotiated peace will require compromise from both sides, but it will be Ukraine that will be asked to give up land that it has sacrificed so much to defend. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Well, our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale in Kyiv told us a little more about how Ukraine feels not having a seat at the table.
This is what always worried President Zelensky, and to be honest, worried a lot of European leaders, that there would be a deal done between Presidents Trump and President Putin without President Zelensky present. Now, we know that the Americans are talking to European allies. We know that President Trump has talked to President Putin. And President Zelensky has been careful so far not to criticize President Trump. But clearly he is worried about what is going to be discussed. First of all, over the fact that he is not going to be there. It doesn't seem likely at the moment, that's for sure. And secondly, that there is this talk of swapping territory. Now, the only territory that will be swapped is essentially Ukrainian territory. Yes, Ukraine may have a sliver of Kursk, but it's not much to bargain with, and it looks like that Ukraine would have to give up claims, from what we're hearing, to the entire Donbass, which it's been fighting hard for, losing tens of thousands of troops the last, not just 3.5 years, but remember, since 2014. So I think there's a lot of concern here as to what will happen at that meeting. That is why President Zelensky's also been talking to European leaders, trying to shore up support. They too, in the past, have said no decisions without Ukraine. The question is, will they stand up to Donald Trump? Will they be having a voice in these negotiations? Because clearly Donald Trump wants to do a deal.
Our defence correspondent there, Jonathan Beale, in Kyiv. Well, earlier I spoke to Alexander Khadra. He's a former assistant to the Ministry of Defence in Ukraine, and I began by asking him what he made of this potential peace deal.
It's absolutely impossible, neither politically nor legally, and the majority of Ukrainians, up to 80% of Ukrainians, are against any territorial concession in return for peace. And now we don't have any proposal of peace. Trump and Putin are talking about ceasefire. Secondly, this war is not about territories. This war is about the very existence of Ukrainian state and Ukrainian nation, because there is an absolutely clear genocidal intent from the Russian part. You that back in 2021, when the Russians for the first time threatened to re-invade Ukraine, they demanded the United States to get off the continent and expel the Central and European nations out of NATO. So this war and the goals of Putin are not just about Ukrainian territories. I am native of Donetsk city that has been occupied by the Russians since 2014. But I will say that Crimea even more important than my native city, because with Crimea in Russian hands, and we've seen it in the beginning of the reinvasion, Russians were able to cut our sea lines of communication from the ports of Odessa and some other Black Sea port, damaging not just Ukraine's economy, but the global food security. And that's why Crimea is not just a terrain, it's not just a home to Crimean Tatars and other indigenous people, but it's strategically important point for Ukraine, for the Black Sea and beyond. Because without Crimea, Russia could not be able to project its power into Syria, Libya, and Northern Africa. So many layers to this conflict. And unfortunately, Mr. Trump and his buddies, including Mr. Witkoff, they do not understand the, let's say, complexity of the conflict and consequences for Europe, for the region as a whole.
Alexander Khadra there speaking to me, former assistant to the Ministry of Defence in Ukraine. Now, I'm going to take you to the live shot that we're continuing to monitor at BBC News. This is just off of the US West Coast, where, as you can see, the SpaceX Dragon capsule has now splashed down after that 4 astronaut crew have arrived back down from the International Space Station. We are awaiting the crew to come out. So we're just monitoring these pictures as we await that 4-person crew to leave the capsule. And the astronauts on board, two Americans, Nicole Ayers and Anne McLean. Also, a Japanese astronaut, Takuya Onishi, and a Russian cosmonaut, Kirill Peskov, who are just inside, and we're awaiting that exciting moment that this 4-person crew will come out of the SpaceX Dragon capsule, which has just splashed down, which has been splashed down, basically come down from space, splashed off of the US West Coast, off of the coast of California, and has been now retrieved by the teams there. The capsule doors have opened recently, and we are awaiting for these 4